Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Two Asian Blokes podcast, a podcast where we talk about Asian pop culture, movies, TV shows, video games, food, music, whatever we're feeling at the time, really. My name is Dan with a H, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Thavy. Hi, Thavy.
Yes, just been looking forward to recording this episode for a while. We get to talk about the best movies of 2021.
Yeah, it's going to be refreshing talking about some good movies for a change.
Yeah,
feels like we've been talking about some bad stuff recently.
Yeah, it really
or at least disappointing stuff. So yeah, looking forward to talking about something good.
Which will obviously be followed by our worst off list.
Yeah.
I think our best off list is quite shrouded in mystery because I really don't know yours and you maybe don't know mine.
For people that not have listened to as much of our stuff, Tavy and I have pretty different film tastes. Like we like a lot of the same stuff, but we definitely have, stuff that I like, but Tavy will not sit through. So, and vice versa as well. Tavy's taste tends to err more on the artsy side, whereas mine, I'll sit through a schlocky action flick that has Jason Statham in it. Whereas Tavy might not necessarily have time for that. So yeah, it'll be an interesting talk. So Tavy and I both have 10 movies, a top 10 list and a bottom 10 list. These aren't films that are necessarily on theme for us.
Yeah, they're not just all Asian cinema, even though, we haven't even just been talking about Asian cinema anyway. So.
But we're opening up the floor to any and all films that came out in the year of 2021, basically.
I guess my criteria was whether it was released in Oz at 2021, because some of them, they were made in 2020, but they had a 2021 release date at festivals. So
sure.
That was kind of my criteria. But yeah, it's fairly loose. But let's just get straight into it. Number 10, do you want to... I want to hear yours first.
My number 10 is No Sudden Move. Steven Soderbergh crime thriller. Have you seen it?
I've got it on my radar. I want to watch it. It's kind of it's a crime thriller.
Yeah, crime thriller. Steven Soderbergh, this is his element. This is what he does. And it's very good. It's a bit slower than his other works. It's not an Ocean's movie, if that's what you're looking for. It's more cerebral and it's more of a slow burn. I think that might alienate some viewers. But the cast is great. It's got Don Cheadle in it, Benicio del Toro, Kieran Culkin is in there, David Harbour, Brendan Fraser. It's good to see him back. I really like Brendan Fraser, and he's got stuff going on in his life that have caused him to kind of drop off on the scene. But it seems like he's making a comeback, and I really like that.
Good on him.
Yeah, good on him. He's overcome a lot to get back to where he is now, and he does really well in this film too. Yeah, it's good. I would recommend it. Probably not as strong as something like Traffic, but there's just something effortless about the film. It's a director that knows what he's doing in this genre and, pulls it off with ease. So
yeah, I really want to see it. It looks good.
Yeah, I won't spoil anything. I think for both of these lists, probably we're not going to spoil these films because they are good films that we want you to watch. So we'll do generally spoiler-free talk.
Yeah, No Sudden Move. Huh? That's cool.
It's easy to watch, so you don't really have to get into any kind of mind frame. Just watch it. What's your number 10?
Number 10 is a Taiwanese movie called The Silent Forest. It has some pretty strong themes based on a real-life scandal that happened at a school for deaf kids. Or mute kids, and there was a sexual abuse scandal, and basically the kids are trying to speak out, but no one will listen to them. And it's one of those movies where it kind of goes beyond good and bad. It's not per se an enjoyable watch. The performances are very raw, and what is depicted in the film is fairly graphic.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's a film that is important because it's something that a lot of people kind of turn their backs on or don't really want to talk about because it makes them feel uncomfortable, which is, it's fine, but I think it's not done in a way that exploits, the incident. It's trying to bring to light these atrocities that can happen.
But it's pretty heavy stuff, is it?
There are definitely other films that I watched this year that I would probably have enjoyed way more than watching this movie. But I think this movie kind of struck me in a different way that I don't think I could have left it off. It's probably not a movie I'd watch again, but I would urge people, if they had the chance, to watch this movie.
I think for that kind of movie, the performances are quite important, right?
The performances are excellent, which makes it harder to watch because you just feel really devastated. It's similar to a film that we mentioned during the Squid Game episode, Silenced. That movie is available on Netflix. It's very, very similar film, and that's another movie I would tell people to watch, even if it's really hard to watch.
So you have to be in the right frame of mind for it.
I understand if people don't want to watch it, but I think when you watch a disturbing movie like this, and this is not just saying like, grindhouse horror or anything like this, is like
disturbing on an emotional level.
Yeah, on an emotional level. But yeah, The Silent Forest, that's my high number 10.
Okay. Shall we move to number 9?
Yeah, let's do it.
Number 9 for me was The Suicide Squad.
Yeah. Very enjoyable.
So not to be confused with Suicide Squad.
Sorry, I was just drinking my whiskey. You said suicide. No,
the pronoun in the title is quite important and quite an important distinction.
Yes.
So The Suicide Squad, it's a reboot by James Gunn. If you haven't heard of The Suicide Squad, it's a comic book property from DC. Basically, the premise is get a bunch of bad guys into a team so that if you get these bad guys to do the mission for you, if the mission goes awry, they're expendable. You can blow them up. I think this is just a really great reattempt at reinvigorating the franchise. It's basically what the first Suicide Squad movie should have been.
Yeah.
It's violent, it's funny, it's irreverent.
Yeah, it's definitely, James Gunn owns that kind of look.
Yeah. I mean, without spoiling anything, there's a lot of death in it.
The thing I really liked about this movie, it felt like there were stakes because a lot of the characters are fairly unknown, so you don't know whether they're going to live or die.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a really fun movie to watch.
Right. Like, I think a weakness with the first attempt was that you've got people like Will Smith on board, which, if you have someone as big as Will Smith on board, they're not really going to kill him off. He's going to be a pretty integral part of the film. Whereas the James Gunn version, there's not really quite anyone at that level, and all the characters on even keel with the audience as well. Like, there's no clear audience favorite besides probably Harley Quinn. But yeah, you do get a sense that anybody could go at any time, and that's part of the fun of the film.
Yeah, it's a shame that this movie didn't do very well financially, because it is one of the better superhero films that came out, and it's the kind of superhero movie that I like to watch. It doesn't take itself too seriously. The violence factor is a plus, but yeah, I just enjoyed watching the characters here.
Yeah, it's harder to market an R-rated superhero film. It should be getting easier with things like Deadpool and Logan being so successful, but
Joker.
Still, there's a barrier, I think. You can't take your kids to watch The Suicide Squad, I feel like. And that's a big problem for a big majority of the audience for those kinds of films.
Yeah, I like the special effects in this movie. James Gunn does really well with like mixing practical and CGI, and he's got this kind of like if you're familiar with like trauma movies, there's kind of like sort of ultra violent kind of schlocky movies that were I think made in the 80s.
Is it like Grindhouse?
And, it come off the back of Grindhouse, so similar to that aesthetic. But yeah, you can see that in his Guardians of the Galaxy and in this movie. So very enjoyable action sequences. Good performances,
and
good
it's
stakes,
funny.
Good time. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, it is a good time. I would recommend it.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
All right, what's your number 9, Thavy?
I've got The French Dispatch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this movie kind of just snuck in. I'd watched it only recently. It's a Wes Anderson film, so anyone who is familiar with Wes Anderson knows he has a very idiosyncratic style, symmetrical frames, like kind of meticulous like actions within the shots, and that's what I really liked about this movie. It's like the choreography of shots and actions in the film were just a joy to watch. It's kind of an anthology, so I guess the backdrop of the story is that a newsprint called The French Dispatch, which is like, I think they're an American publication, but printing for French people. I think there's 3 stories, corresponds to one of the writers of The French Dispatch. All-star cast, Bill Murray.
It's got all the Wes Anderson players in it.
Yeah, all the Wes Anderson players. Owen Wilson's in there.
Adrian
Lea
Brody.
Seydoux. Yes, Adrian Brody. There's a really... Adrian Brody is really funny in this movie. It's just really entertaining. It's like, you know when you watch like a really good fight scene and you enjoy the choreography?
Yeah.
The joy of watching Wes Anderson movies is just watching this kind of surreal, almost like comic timing, but in live action. And you're kind of like looking at a painting, and it's just goes at such a good pace.
Yeah, he toes the line of entertainment and art really well. All of his films feel like they'd look really good in a scarf.
Yeah. No, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, for sure.
But without being overly pretentious, it's that middle ground.
Yeah, a lot of people, if you're in the filmmaking world, Wes Anderson's name gets thrown around a lot. He's really popular. And yeah, I mean, like, rightly so. I've enjoyed all the movies that I've seen from him. I haven't seen them all.
What's your favorite?
Fantastic Mr. Fox is probably my favorite. That was the first Wes Anderson movie I saw, and I just loved the comic energy of it. It's just a really fun watch.
It's funny how, because that is a stop-motion animated film, but it's funny how, even his live-action works replicate the same pace as Fantastic Mr. Fox, you know? It's, not that much...
definitely, yeah.
That different to watching one of his live-action films. And it's really hard to kind of get that kind of pace right in live-action. It just speaks to the strength of his comedic timing, and he's a good director.
Yeah, The French Dispatch is the most Wes Anderson movie you can possibly watch. But it's very, very enjoyable, and probably a good gateway if you want to get into maybe more art house kind of cinema. But I wouldn't even watch it from that lens. Just watch it to enjoy good visuals, good energy, some pretty funny stories. It's just really, really well done. But yeah, Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch is my number 9.
Okay, moving on to number 8 then. My number 8 is Willy's Wonderland.
I like this movie a lot too. I don't think we've ever talked about this movie.
Gonna say off the bat, it's not for everyone because it's very silly.
It's extremely silly.
I like it for very silly reasons that probably aren't going to be accessible to everybody. Just a brief kind of outline of what the film is. It's a horror slasher with an 80s vibe. Nicolas Cage, he's on form in this film. He's all in Nicolas Cage. He doesn't say a line in the whole film. His character doesn't have a name. He's just a traveler who finds himself stuck in a town, and the only way for him to get his car fixed is to agree to clean up this closed down family restaurant that turns out to be filled with these sentient and bloodthirsty animatronic characters. And yeah, it's as ridiculous as that sounds.
You know what I found quite surprising about this movie, though, is the cinematography. It's good.
It's not a bad-looking film.
It's a pretty good-looking movie, and it's definitely a low-budget movie. And, the acting from the other cast members are bad, but it's just was that the direction? Because I feel like it worked for this movie because it is paying homage to some of the sillier 80s horror slasher films. And I didn't mind, there are so many plot holes in this movie and so many bad decisions, but none of that irked me because I was this is a pretty dumb movie, but it's it kind of went with the, the vibe of the film. But what did you think about those performances?
To be honest, I didn't really enjoy anything to do with the side characters, but that said, the movie needs them to be in it. It wouldn't work if it was just Nick Cage on his own.
Just beating up.
It kind of contrasts with his character because the side characters are all these teenagers that get caught up in this mess and they're all panicking and making stupid decisions, which is that 80s horror trope of horror movie characters making stupid decisions. But then it contrasts so well with Nick Cage's character that's just kind of going about his business and getting stuff done. He's in this situation, but he doesn't really react to any of the the absurd stuff that's happening around him.
Actually, I want to throw you a question about the Nick Cage character, because I read a lot of criticism about this film and about the whole not talking and how none of his backstory is really explained. Like he has this drink that he likes to drink, and he's very like on schedule, you know.
Yes.
He's solely bent on doing his task, which is cleaning. And people were kind of like, oh, you know, I didn't get it because he doesn't talk and he has all these weird quirks that aren't explained. But for me, I think him not talking and him not having any backstory explained work for the film, because like his character, he's badass and that's his existence. And like, do you feel like modern audiences just need to have shit explained for them?
Oh, I think if you're gonna like this film, you'll like it. Like I said, it's not for everybody. If you are the type that needs things to make sense, then this film is not for you. But because like the best part of the film is Nicolas Cage's character, and his character is essentially this question mark of a man, you know. Like, he doesn't say anything. These animatronic animals are coming to life and trying to kill him, and he just like does away with them and continues cleaning up the shop like he was asked to. Like you said, he likes this drink and he drinks it in a very scheduled manner, and there's no explanation for that. He plays pinball in a really weird manner. And, and that's not explained.
It's almost like erotic in a sense.
Like, I think this kind of character only works when someone like Nicolas Cage is playing it. Like, it wouldn't have worked with any actor that I can think of. The fact that it is Nicolas Cage, you kind of associate that weird character with just Nicolas Cage. So you don't really need it to be explained to you. But that's only if you're familiar with, you know, Nicolas Cage and, you know, how eccentric he can be. Yeah, I think this movie would probably alienate a lot of people just by being so absurd. But for me, that was like a huge selling point of the film, is just the absurdity of it.
This movie for me is definitely a beers and buddies movie. Just like, if you don't want to watch anything too serious, but you're watching just some like goofy fun and surprisingly well shot cinema. The cinematography, it's better than it has any right to be. And I was really surprised by that. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this movie. It put a smile on my face for sure. You're mentioning a lot of movies that I was going to mention in our special mentions section. So it kind of saved me some time there. But yeah, no, cool.
All right. What's your number 8?
So number 8 for me is the Demon Slayer movie.
Oh, okay.
Mugen Train arc. Yeah, this was just so much fun watching it in the cinema. It's weird because it's just the anime, because you need to watch it to continue the story. I quite like the Demon Slayer anime. It's just about Tanjiro is a demon slayer. His family is murdered by a demon. And he decides that he wants to become a demon slayer to rid the world of demons. And the setting is kind of like early, like Edo period Japan. If you're familiar with shonen anime, there's a lot of that, you know, powering up and feeling inadequate, and like a team that is like way better than the main character, but he's most likely going to become as strong as them by the end of the series. It's got some great characters. I enjoyed the series, but it's not the best anime that I've ever seen. But when I watched the movie, I just enjoyed the animation in the theater so much, and just the sounds, you know, when they're doing like the typical anime yells and whatnot.
Right.
It's just like so entertaining. And there's like a aspect of this movie that I really like, and I like in a lot of films, is exploration of the subconscious. Because in this film, they're trying to capture a demon that is on one of the trains, and the demon has basically put all the passengers and our main characters to sleep, and he's trying to feed off the humans while they're sleeping, and he feeds them like good memories, like memories that each person wants. And I think for Tanjiro, he's like back with his family, and it's like, oh man, like something about anime when they like explore that kind of shit, it like gets me emotional. Like, oh fuck. But like you can kind of see some of the goofier aspects with like some of his companions. They've got like really silly dreams, which I won't explain. I'll let people watch it for themselves. But there's one character that kind of steals the show. You basically start off saying, like, who the fuck is this guy, to, oh, my bro. Like, by the end of the movie.
Okay.
It was just a really fun movie to watch.
Okay. Do you think they pumped a bit of money into this film compared to the anime? Like, does it look expensive?
It does. Well, there's two major fight sequences in this with Tanjiro and Inosuke. Yeah. So Tanjiro and Inosuke, like, fight one of the demons, and it's just like this really awesome choreography and just really great animation. And then there's kind of a climax fight scene, which is admittedly very random, but it's awesome. Like, in terms of a structure, it's not really a film. It's just like watching anime, but in a cinema. Like, if you were just, like, back in the day, if we were just going to watch Naruto or Bleach in a cinema and watching the key, like, fight scene moments, it's kind of like that.
Right.
But there's definitely a bit more production on some of the fight scenes and some of the animation. Yeah, it was just a really entertaining movie. And I actually didn't have too much expectation of it. I knew people liked it, and I knew it did really well in 2020. I think it was the highest grossing movie of 2020 because that was, you know, the grand peak of coronavirus. But I really enjoyed this movie in the cinema. I think all the elements are enjoyable to watch in this movie. And it didn't feel like it dragged at any point. Some bits felt random, but no, it was just a great watch. Yeah. What's your number 7 then?
My number 7 is probably something that flew under your radar. It did for me as well until I watched it. It's Till Death, starring Megan Fox.
Oh, I've not heard of this movie. Yeah.
It's a thriller. Very simple premise. Megan Fox, she's handcuffed to her dead husband in a remote snow cabin, and criminals from her past are sent there to get her. It's just a tense thriller, very simple premise, this enclosed location. It's better than it has any right to be honest. Like, when you think of a Megan Fox film, like, I know she's a good actress, but it's hard to find a film where she's really allowed to shine, I guess.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
Jonah Hex.
I mean, I haven't seen it, and I'm not planning on seeing it, so I'm going to have to take your word on that. But, like, I mean, the only film that I can think of is something like Jennifer's Body.
Yeah, that movie has had a bit of a resurgence recently.
I think at the time it was released, it was marketed as this sexy Megan Fox romp, because that's what she was at the time. It was just, she was just a sex icon, like something pretty, something to put next to Shia LaBeouf to make him a bit more tolerable. But yeah, she's an excellent actress. And I think this movie really allows her to shine, because a lot of it is just her in these tense situations where she has to kind of evade detection in this snowy location and overcome these obstacles that you wouldn't really think about until she's actually put in this situation. And yeah, just the musical score and the isolation just really adds to the tension and turns something that could have easily been mediocre into something, you know, really good. It's just a good watch. It's really easy to watch as well.
Yeah, no, interesting. Till Death. Yeah, no, I don't know very much about this movie at all. Yeah, I'll probably check it out.
It's a good popcorn film. Yeah, and it's on Netflix, so very easy to find. What's your number 7?
You might be surprised by this being at number 7. You might have thought this film would be higher on my list, but number 7 is Dune.
Okay.
How would I kind of summarize the premise of this movie? I guess it's about a family who's told to go to this planet comprising entirely of a desert to harvest this thing called spice, which sets this kind of galactic empire, or is the source of the galactic empire's power. And it follows sort of like a Game of Thrones kind of plot. One of the movies that Timothée Chalamet starred in this movie. But yeah, I read the book last year to prep myself for watching the movie, but it was postponed to this year. But yeah, no, I'm just a big fan of Denis Villeneuve. You know, I love Sicario.
Doesn't really do a bad film, right?
No, he doesn't. I love Blade Runner 2049. I've watched Enemy, which Jake Gyllenhaal is a very interesting film. Prisoner is great. He's definitely going towards like sci-fi.
Arrival
is really good too. Yeah, no, he hasn't done a bad movie yet. And I think the movie does a really good job at adapting the story. It's only the first half of the book, but there's a lot that they've taken out. But I don't think that stuff is too necessary. But just the visual effects in this movie look great. The costuming is great. And I'm also like really sad this movie didn't do as well as it did. Because everyone was watching The Eternals, which is I haven't seen, but it just sounds like a significantly subpar film to Dune.
It had a weird release schedule, Dune, because I remember it was released in Europe a long time before it was released in Australia.
Oh, really?
And also, wasn't there like a HBO? Isn't it a HBO?
Yeah,
film
it was
as
an
well?
HBO Max, so it would have suffered a bit from its release,
So
which is a shame.
It's not ideal.
It's a cinema movie, definitely a cinema movie. You got to watch it. You got to listen to Hans Zimmer's score.
Yeah, the score is very important. The sound design in general is a huge part of the cinema experience.
You got to watch the Baron. Like, I love the depiction. The main antagonists are these series of people called the Harkonnens, and their depiction is like the most unsubtle evil people you'll ever see.
Stellan Skarsgård is the main one, right? Yeah.
But yeah, there's kind of like, I've seen one review talk about where like this movie still sort of has kind of an art house vibe to it. And I guess like that just comes in a lot in its cinematography and like some of its slower paced sequences. But yeah, no, all-star cast, Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson,
Josh Brolin, Jason Momoa, Javier Bardem.
Who's the actor that plays the Duke? I've seen him. Oscar Isaacs. Is that his name?
Oscar Isaacs.
Yeah.
Dave Bautista is in it. Polka Dot Man from the Suicide Squad is in it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a lot of people.
The guy from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is in it. Chang Chen. And they're all good as well. Like, all the performances are really good, aren't they? Yeah, and it's getting a sequel. It did well enough to merit a sequel.
Of course, it's got Zendaya in it.
Yeah.
They've got a bit of a Zendaya crush these days now, so, you know.
Oh, really?
She's also been in a lot of movies this year.
Yeah, she's a bit
cool.
of a
I dig her.
hot topic at the moment, yeah. Like,
yeah.
I like how they let you know that it's part one straight away. You know? Like, so you're not expecting an ending, really. Like, it does have an ending, of course, but you know there's more to come.
Yeah.
You don't come away from it thinking, oh, that was just half a movie. It was like its own movie in its own right. And yeah, I'm jazzed for the idea of watching another one of these.
Before moving on to the next number, I just wanted to mention, like, I was talking to you about this the other day. The one thing that I would kind of critique with this movie is that the soundtrack, it's really good soundtrack. There's some moments where like there's kind of a vocal that illustrates the subtext too much of the scene, and it kind of sounds like the music is mourning for the audience or something, and it kind of made me laugh. It's kind of hard to explain, but you'll see it
pretty often.
when you watch it. It gets a bit bombastic at times.
It's a very memeable sound bite.
yeah.
It's actually a lot higher on my list than it was on yours. It's number 2 on my list.
Oh, well, there you go. Spoilers. But maybe... Oh, shit. So
that's right.
I guess
we've already talked about it, so yeah, we don't need to.
Yeah, fair enough. All right.
Shall we move on to 6? 6 is another movie that maybe you haven't heard of. It's Boss Level, starring Frank Grillo. It's an action film with a video game plotline, I guess. So basically, Frank Grillo is stuck in a time loop and he's reliving the same day over and over again. And in this day, he keeps getting assassinated by a group of people, but he doesn't know why initially. It's kind of like Edge of Tomorrow, if you've seen Edge of Tomorrow, but it's far less serious than Edge of Tomorrow. It's got more of a video game aesthetic. So, like, some of the sound bites and the sound effects are quite video gamey. The idea of him resetting to, like, his last save point is like, what they're leaning on here. So it is quite winky in that way. And all the performances are really, like, deliciously over the top. Mel Gibson is in it. He's playing the main bad guy. I mean, he's clearly in it for a paycheck, but that doesn't really detract from his performance. You know, he's in classic Mel Gibson sinister form. Michelle Yeoh is randomly in it. The action is really good. This is the kind of film that just appeals to me on a personal level. It's right in my wheelhouse of sci-fi action, with more emphasis on the action than the sci-fi. And Frank Grillo, he's got a stunt background. Do you know who Frank Grillo is?
He's in Jiu-Jitsu.
He's in Jiu-Jitsu. He's the main dude.
No, but he's in a lot of the Avengers movies.
Yeah. So he's kind of one of those guys that started off as a stuntman, but then transitioned into acting. So he's like kind of got that Scott Adkins vibe of like, you know, sometimes he's the leading man. He's not the strongest leading man, but you know, he can pull it off when he needs to, and he's quite good in it. He lends a fair amount of charisma to the performance, and yeah, it's just a really fun time. A lot of the fun I got from Edge of Tomorrow was seeing Tom Cruise like kill himself over and over again. And I think a lot of the enjoyment of Boss Level for a lot of people will come from the same thing. It's just, you know, a silly kind of concept that the movie uses to its advantage. The action set pieces are really well shot. You know, there's a lot of long takes when it comes to the fight scenes. It's choreographed really well and filmed really well. It's not for everyone again, but yeah, definitely my kind of movie. Yeah, if you're looking for depth, this is not the film for you, but, you know, it's a good time. What's your number 6?
Number 6 for me is kind of cheating a bit because it's 2 movies, but Rurouni Kenshin, The Final and The Beginning.
Okay.
So I kind of see these 2 movies as one entity. We mentioned this far a while back now, you know, on our first episode.
Our anime adaptations.
Yeah, I haven't seen the original anime, but I really liked the original trilogy of this movie. So when I heard that this movie was coming out, or these movies were coming out, I was pretty excited. And it was the one that covers the Samurai X OVA that came out in Australia years ago, that storyline. But then kind of continuing that, like, again, it's confusing because The Final is the first one, but then The Beginning is the last one because it's the prequel. But yeah, I just love the action sequences to this. Everything that I mentioned before in that episode. Great action sequences, some good morals. You're being entertained, but you're also kind of being uplifted at the same time. You know, like, he is basically a samurai who worked for, you know, the new way. So he was like an assassin, but once the war was over, like, he gave up killing people. And there's so many times in the movie where, like, he can best everyone so easily. He could just kill them and then it'd be done with, but he chooses not to. And the whole, like, you know, the message that you get from this movie is like, you know, choose life, I suppose. So they're really positive
it's
messages.
Batman, basically.
Yeah, but like what I didn't mention in that episode is the One OK Rock songs. They're so awesome, and I've missed the days where there's been just like a really awesome song that has accompanied a movie. When the end credits comes and then the One OK Rock songs play, it's like, oh, it's just like, you sit there, like, you just bask in its, like, you know, fulfillment, and it's great. Like,
did they do the ending theme for every movie of that series?
Yeah, every movie they've done.
They've done a different track for them.
Yeah, I think the first one was The Beginning. The second one was Mighty Long 4. I think the third one was Heartache. Then the final was Renegades, and then the last one was Broken Hearted Gold. They did it all, man. My mate was telling me that the lead actor was the one that got the band onto making the movie music. Like, they don't do the soundtrack, they just do the accompanying songs, because the actor was mates with the One OK Rock band. And he's like, yeah, get these guys on. And it's funny because, like, the songs aren't of, like, you know, that period. They're not like samurai tracks, but they're just like, they're just awesome. They're rock songs. But like, yeah, I think the soundtrack, that's the songs play a big part of my rating in this movie, because it's just like, you just feel really empowered. And like, you know me, I don't really like empowerment movies per se. Like, I find them very, like, low level, but like, when it's just really obvious. But like, for these kind of movies to just empower you without having to say you're a strong individual, but with just the raw emotions and the raw action sequences, really well choreographed action sequences. Probably one of the best fight scenes I've seen this year is in the final. Really, just when it's just silent, it's good.
It's a really good example of how to successfully adapt anime to live action, because anime and live action have different strengths and weaknesses. Like some things you can do in anime that you just can't do in live action. And I think a lot of movies fall down when they try to replicate an anime exactly as it is, because you just can't do it in live action. But with these movies, it seems like they know the limitations of live action. They know that they can't copy the action of the anime exactly, so they've chosen a different style of action that better suits live action. And although it might be different to the anime, it's a lot easier on the eyes than something like the Cowboy Bebop Netflix series.
As you've always mentioned, like, Japanese kind of get a pass, and maybe it's because they kind of just go for it. Because, I mean, the Japanese have made some bad live action adaptations as well, but Kenshin just really works. Like, the main villain in the final, because you spot him so easily, because like,
is that the blonde guy
costume,
with the little glasses?
The costume design is pretty accurate, and then you got this dude with like fluoro orange vest and blonde hair. But I think they don't give a shit about that. It's just like, let's make a really good story, really well done action sequences. Like, the action sequences in this movie, just a joy to watch. Like, I could go on about them forever, which I won't. This episode will never end. But it's just great to watch. I'm big fan.
Are they still on Netflix? Probably,
yeah,
right?
I think they're still on Netflix, so you can catch them on Netflix. Yeah, you might be confused because the original trilogy is not on there. I would tell people to watch the original trilogy, because I think the third one in the original trilogy is really good. Awesome. Same reason, like, this one's awesome fight scenes.
So anime as well. Like,
it's
the bad guy in that one is amazing. But
all right, let's move on to your number 5 before I get carried away.
My number 5 is a Norwegian film called The Trip. It stars Numi Rapace from Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It's about a couple with marital issues who take a trip to their holiday cabin, both with the intent to murder the other for insurance money.
That's an interesting premise.
So it's like a dark comedy thriller. Yeah, again, it's quite a simple premise. And again, it's a kind of isolated location. It's really funny. Like, I don't want to spoil it. But events unfold. Like, the longer it goes on, the more kind of ridiculous it gets. It's kind of almost farcical, but at the same time quite dark with the kind of stuff that they're covering. Because they're this married couple that have just fallen so out of love with each other. They're having such a hard time living with each other that they're kind of resorting to such drastic measures. And performances are really good as well. It's, again, just a really fun time. It's one of those movies where I had no expectations. So when I watched it, and it was like really good, I was blown away by how good it was. In the similar vein of Till Death, it's a lot better than it has any right to be. Just the humor in it is really good. And you can tell it's not a high budget film as well, but what they do with the budget, just the creativity behind the writing, they make use of every cent, I reckon. Like, it's funny, but also it's a little bit uncomfortable to watch. But the uncomfortable nature of it comes from, like, how kind of grounded in reality it is as well. Yeah, very easy to watch. What's your number 5?
For me on the list, number 4 and 5 were quite, they were kind of contending with each other a bit, but I settled to number 5 being Minari. A film that I mentioned in our, I guess I call our Bling Empire episode. Yeah. It's just about a Korean family who've migrated to America, and they're trying to start a new life on the farm. The performances in this movie are great. Very kind of understated. This movie is very like Asian cinema, but it has been made by a Western production. And I think I put this here on this list is because we talk about, like, Western Asian media, which has kind of like a distinct style to it. Like, it tends to be more centered towards the rom-coms. But we get these kind of films, like, you know, like we said, like with The Farewell and Minari. And I think these films are landmarks because they tell this kind of Asian story in a very Asian way, but it's also not completely an Asian story. It's an American story. It's an American film. And I think with these families, like growing up in, I think, what was it, in the 80s? I think the film is set in the 80s. And it's like, you know, the precursor to our history, to where we are today. And I think it just really captures probably our parents' generation. And like, again, I just have to commend the portrayal of the white people in this movie, because a lot of people are quite friendly. Like, I hear about stories from probably like our parents, like they probably faced some discrimination for sure, but I think most of the time were quite fairly welcomed.
There's a reason our parents have lived in Australia for so long, and a lot of it has to do with how much they were welcomed into Australia by the people living here. You know, like our parents are still friends with a lot of the Australian people that they...
and we've called them like part of our family. We've called them
they're our uncles and aunties,
grandpas and grands. For sure. And I think that's the essence of this film, which I really liked, and as well as the performances from the grandma, the performance from the kids. The kid actors are fantastic in this movie. It's very heartfelt. Like Nat said in the episode, it's a very like layered movie. You know. There's a lot of, it's a pretty simple plot, but there's a lot to question. Like, there's a lot to see in this movie, like, you know, in terms of its craft. Like, it kind of disappears and you're just like watching people, which like some people might say, oh, why the fuck do I just want to watch people doing shit? Like, where's like, you know, it's like... I mean,
that's the definition of a movie, isn't it? People doing shit.
Doing shit. But yeah, it's really just like, it's. I think it was a great experience, and surprisingly a good cinematic experience too, I think.
It's an emotional film to watch though, right? Bit heavy.
It's not too heavy. Like, it's a PG rated film, so it's something I would definitely maybe let younger audiences and stuff watch. It's kind of a gateway to getting into more serious and thoughtful kind of cinema. But I just think its impact on like what it could mean for like a Western company to make these kind of movies is like, I think it's fantastic. So, yeah, I put that at number 5.
Brad Pitt's production company, right?
Yeah, Plan B. That's it. Yeah. Good on you, Brad Pitt. I said it before, and I say it again. Good on you, man. What are we up to now?
Number 4. Number 4.
Yeah.
So, don't look this up. My number 4 is Blood Red Sky. If you don't know anything about this film, don't look it up, because I feel like the marketing for it spoils the movie somewhat. It's on Netflix, and even the thumbnail for the Netflix film kind of spoils some of it. I mean, even if you do happen to see the thumbnail or any of it, it's not a huge deal because it is a good movie in its own right. But I feel like if you went into this movie blind, you'd get a lot more enjoyment out of it. It's a German film, I think.
All right.
And it's an action thriller. Die Hard on an airplane is what how I would describe it. Like a terrorist hijack a plane, and it's up to this lone woman to evade detection and kind of mess up their plans. Dominic Purcell is randomly in it. He's one of the terrorists. It's a tense thrill ride. It's paced to perfection. Again, the performances are just outstanding. The direction is great. And yeah, I'm finding that a lot of the movies on my list are kind of in these enclosed environment situations. And I think that's probably has something to do with the year, because, you know, these are just kind of cheaper locations to film in. I think a lot of the enjoyment comes from how they utilize this location to make the most out of their budgets. This film in particular is a standout just because the premise on its own is quite good, and where it goes from there is even better. There's also this kind of family dynamic that you get really invested in. It's just a really good combination of just excellent screenwriting and great performances, and it just does well to sell like quite a simple premise. There's a bit of a blending in genres as well, which again I don't really want to get into. But yeah, if you are going to watch this, yeah, try not to look at anything going into it. Even the title screen at the start. Try to avoid watching it.
I'm trying to slip through her eyes closed. Oh, yeah. I can't see.
Keep your eyes closed until the opening like musical sting is over, and then open your eyes and start watching it from there. Right. Yeah, it's quite good. Like I, to be honest, I knew what the movie was about going into it. So, and even then, you know, I was just blown away by how much I enjoyed it. So it's not a huge deal, but I feel like if you did go into it blind, maybe you'd get just a little bit more out of it.
Yeah. You seem to be digging your European films.
Yeah, apparently. But yeah, what's your number 4?
Number 4 is Last Night in Soho. This movie was just such a joy to watch in the cinema. So the premise is kind of hard to explain. It's about an aspiring fashion designer who gets chosen to go to London to go to a school there. And she stays in this room and she begins having dreams about a girl from the 60s named Sandy, and they kind of blend into her reality. And then she finds out that the girl is murdered, and she tries to like seek what happened to her, as well as her going crazy. 2 great performances from the lead actresses. I think the main selling point of this movie was Anya Taylor-Joy, but the main actress is Thomasin McKenzie. She does such a great performance, like someone who's very vibrant and likable, and then to the point where she starts going crazy, someone very vulnerable and someone that you just want to like comfort, I guess. She has a very sympathetic face. She's upcoming.
She was in Jojo Rabbit. And Old. She was in Old.
Her first misstep. I haven't seen that movie, but I've heard it's bad. But yeah, no, she is fantastic in this movie. It's directed by Edgar Wright. If you're familiar with his movies are quite idiosyncratic as well. All of them have pubs. They have very strong soundtrack. Last Night in Soho, to me, has like the best compiled soundtrack that you can listen to, because the main character, she loves music from the 60s. And it plays quite a big role in this movie, the music. And all the music choices are good. I just love the cinematography. It's very reminiscent of those older 60s Italian giallo movies, I guess, Dario Argento. And I think there is probably some nods from this movie to that movie, some of the violence, I guess. There's a supernatural element to this movie, which is also like slightly camp, but it kind of works. It's kind of like the Hammer horror look from I think it's from the 80s or something, I'm not sure. But with the way that Edgar Wright plays with his cinematic techniques, like, you know, camera work, lighting, again, like really strong primary colors you can see in this movie. It's just a visual feast and just so much fun to watch in the cinema, because like the characters they're fairly like exaggerated. They're very easy to read. Like you've got your bitch crowd that like that bully the main character. You got the kind of lovable love interests. Some people criticize their dialogue for being a bit unrealistic, but I think it feels like a movie when you watch it, and it's like that reality. I don't know, I didn't have a problem with it. Like I feel like it's a movie, and I think you said this to me a while ago, like not all movies have to be reality. Movies can just feel like a movie.
Yeah, if all movies had realistic dialogue, there'd be a lot more umming and ahhing involved.
yeah, for sure.
So I think, you know, you kind of have to distance yourself from reality a bit. Not everybody talks like they're in a Quentin Tarantino film.
Yeah. I mean, I love realistic dialogue, but like, yeah, sometimes I can like, you know, the stylized dialogue, because there's bits in this movie where I guess you could criticize it for saying, why would anyone say this to this person? but I think it is like within the style of what it's going for. It's not too out of place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just really great movie, really fun to watch. Production design's great.
Would you say that it feels very much like an Edgar Wright?
It does. That's a really interesting thing about
the way
Edgar
it's been
Wright.
marketed, it does, to me, it doesn't really look like it. Yeah.
It doesn't, but if you watch it, you're like, this is an Edgar Wright movie. In terms of genre, it's his first psychological horror, probably similar to The Neon Demon in terms of his aesthetics. Maybe not as
psychedelic.
Not as psychedelic and not as transgressive, I should say. But it's definitely Edgar Wright, just with his music choices and, you know, it's editing. Really awesome movie. And another movie that I'm really sad that didn't do as well, because when this movie came out and I went to the cinema, I think it was the second day it came out, there was only 2 screenings of this movie.
I don't think it was marketed very well, to be honest.
Yeah. It was going up against Venom and Bond. And so it's like
the big hitters, then Venom.
The big hitters, yeah. And it was like, it's such a shame, because it's like, it has these 2 strong female performances here, and a lot of people are like, oh, where's all the leading women? I mean, why didn't you go watch this movie? It's like 2 awesome performances, you know? And it's like, oh, but I didn't want to watch it. It's too scary. It's like, so you went and watched Venom instead.
I thought they were the same person, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I didn't know Thomas and Mackenzie
well, they're kind of supposed to be the same
that's
person.
what I mean. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of, like, these really cool mirror reflection shots. Yeah, it's just a really technically sound film.
He's a good craftsman, I'd say. Is Edgar Wright, like especially when the way he integrates music with what's going on screen. It's always been like quite fun to watch.
Yeah, I would say this is the best movie I've seen in the cinema. Go fucking check it out. Good shit.
Now I'm gonna watch Venom 2 instead. It's got a better soundtrack.
Oh man! All right.
Number 3, we're up to. Number 3 for me was I Care a Lot, starring Rosamund Pike. So Rosamund Pike plays a corrupt legal guardian for the elderly who makes a fortune fleecing old people out of their assets and stashing them in shady retirement homes. So her life is going really well until she fleeces the wrong old woman who turns out to be the mother of a notorious gangster, played with vigor by Peter Dinklage. So yeah, I really like the idea of this premise from the offset. Like, just hearing the premise made me want to watch the film. It's kind of a hard film to give a genre for. If I had to pick a genre for it, it would probably be thriller. But it's almost like a black comedy, kind of hard to classify. The writing is just really tight. Rosamund Pike's performance is just really good as like this kind of somewhat bitchy character who is the hero of the film. She's the protagonist for sure, but she's not a very likable person. The things she's doing to these old people, she's essentially stealing their livelihoods, you know, but she does it in such a slick and confident manner that you can't help but root for her. Especially when the main antagonist is introduced and it's Peter Dinklage playing this fearsome gangster. Yeah, like there's a clear protagonist and clear antagonist, but the lines between who you're meant to be rooting for is kind of blurred.
So she's kind of a anti-hero?
Yeah, she's an anti-hero for sure. And Peter Dinklage's character as well, you could almost say he's an anti-hero too, because he's kind of just looking out for his mum. But he's this terrible gangster as well at the same time. So. Yeah,
these kind of movies where you portray the protagonist as unlikable, not someone really to root for, but you do. That's really hard to do. There's another movie that's on my worst list that does this very, very poorly. So you know, it really is a talent when you can make someone that you dislike but root for them. It's a good skill.
Yeah, fairly unknown director. Kind of a sleeper hit, I would say, of this year. Actually, I'm not sure how it's been received. Like, thinking back on it, not that much happens throughout the film. But just the way, like, both of their operations are kind of portrayed and how it kind of escalates as well is really good. You know, Rosamund Pike, I feel like, is really good at playing this character that, like, if you've seen Gone Girl,
Yeah, I've seen Gone Girl,
yeah, she's just really good at playing this kind of duplicitous, smug character, I guess.
She's come a long way from a duplicitous character from Die Another Day, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Which is kind of her first portrayal of being a double agent. Okay, I'll learn my lesson and pick better roles. Yeah, nice. That's
yeah, she's come a long way from Doom.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But anyway, I Care a Lot. Really good watch. I would recommend it thoroughly.
Black comedies, good stuff. Which leads into my third pick. Which is, I'm not sure whether you consider it a movie or not, but I'm going to put it there anyway. It's Bo Burnham's Inside.
Okay. Yeah.
I've recommended this movie to you a lot.
Yeah, I haven't watched it.
Well, I was watching it with Boone on New Year's Day while we were drinking.
I would say.
It's basically Bo Burnham is a comedian, and I guess he got money from Netflix, and he is shooting this comedy special, which is entirely in his room. And it's basically just watching a man descend into madness from isolation is kind of the rough story. But it is, if you would classify it as a genre, it's a black comedy musical.
He was given a lot of free rein for this film, right?
Yeah.
So he's kind of doing his own thing for a lot of it.
I heard about this movie from some of my younger friends, and I didn't know who Bo Burnham was. And I was like, as you say, it's almost a tough sell. And then when I first heard about it, I'll check it out. And then, I don't know, I think one day I just took the plunge and I watched it. And all the songs in this movie are good. They're funny, punchy, quite facetious.
Right. We got the Bezos song from it, right?
Yeah, the Jeffrey Bezos. Then he did the soundtrack to My Name. The songs that stand out, I think the one that was played on the radio was Welcome to the Internet. But there's some personal favorites, I think White Woman's Instagram is really funny. Turning 30 is really funny, but hits home really hard as well. And I think it's the perfect movie to highlight the kind of stress that you can live in, being in isolation for so, because we've all done it for sure. Kind of poke fun at it as well.
But it's kind of over the top, right?
Yeah. He makes fun of internet culture. It's just really entertaining to watch. And just, this dude has done everything himself, the editing, the filming, the lighting and all the gear, and just the framing.
Would you say the humor is kind of South Park-esque? Satirical, irreverent?
Yeah, I guess so. This one's not as crude as South Park, but there's a very underlying sadness. It's pretty depressing, to watch, because I've read up on Bo Burnham, and he suffers from panic attacks and anxiety, and I think he quit performing stand-up for 5 years. He mentions it in the special in Inside, but he actually did stop comedy for 5 years just because of his anxiety, and then as soon as he was getting better to start doing comedy again, COVID happens, and I think this just captures just not just the madness of him, but probably a lot of the stuff that has probably gone through my head when I'm in lockdown. It's a great watch, but yeah, check it out. The music's great. I listen to I've listened to this album a lot. You can listen to all the songs on Spotify and whatnot. But yeah, no, Bo Burnham Inside is, I think, a pretty important piece of film that highlights the past 2 years very, very well. Culturally significant, I would say. Yeah.
Good. Okay, so we're up to number 2. So as I said earlier, my number 2 was Dune. You've highlighted pretty much everything that I like about the film too.
pretty anticlimactic. I actually completely forgot that it was Dune. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a great film in its own right. Even if you don't know and are not familiar with the source material, it's a great film to watch. Looks beautiful. Denis Villeneuve just has his own style. Like, it's a style that I kind of recognize more the more films that I watch from him. I would say that if you liked Blade Runner, his Blade Runner, you'd like Dune. It's not for everyone. I think that if you're thinking of a blockbuster,
you're thinking of Eternals.
it seems similar to Eternals, but just of a better standard and quality.
Yeah, that's the thing, because when it came out, it's like, yeah, that's a shame.
Because it is a bit slower, and it has a lot more emphasis on, how do I describe it?
World building, would you say?
Yeah, world building, but not in an obvious way. Like, he's a very good, he tells more. I mean, he shows more than he tells.
Yeah.
If you're comparing this Dune adaptation to like the 80s Dune adaptation, like in that one, there's a lot more narration. In the old Dune film, Paul has an internal monologue throughout the film, and he's in this monologue, he's kind of explaining elements of the world in quite a lot of detail. While it may make you understand the world more, it slows down the film a lot. But like Denis Villeneuve just doesn't take that time to over-explain. He shows you how everything works rather than tells you. Some people that have read the books might find that a bit vague and annoying. Like, but to watch a film, you don't want it to be over-explained, because it will slow down the pacing of the film and take you out of it a lot of the time.
Sometimes it's better left unsaid.
Yeah, you kind of need to have confidence in your audience's ability to connect the dots.
Because the audience aren't dumb. They know. You don't need to treat your audience like a bunch of idiots. Maybe you do sometimes.
And but I mean, even if you don't quite understand everything that goes on in the film, because some subplots in this film, in Dune, like kind of went over my head the first time I watched it. But you don't really need to understand everything to enjoy it still. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings. Like, Lord of the Rings has so much in it, in the world, that you can't really explain everything unless you want to watch an 8-hour film as opposed to a 4-hour film, but like, not everything is important to understand.
That's an interesting point that you make. You don't need to understand everything to enjoy something. And I'm going to take this point to segue into my number 2, which is a Japanese film, Drive My Car, based on a Haruki Murakami short story. The longest film on my list, which is 3 hours, clocking in. And it's about a recently widowed theatre playwright who is preparing to perform a production of Uncle Vanya by Chekhov. And he interacts with his personal driver. And the movie dwells on themes of loneliness, grief, regret, that kind of stuff, that kind of drama shit. But when you were saying before about not understanding everything, like, there's quite a bit of this movie where, like, I didn't understand maybe what they're talking about. There's a lot of long takes with characters, like, talking to each other. But I think this movie is just pure acting, Right. Much of the movie is him talking with his cast members, directing the play. And what is very interesting about this is the cast members aren't all Japanese. Like, one of them is Indonesian, I think. One of the main characters is Taiwanese. There's another character in the play who's a deaf Korean person. No, she's mute, sorry, not deaf. And she speaks sign language. And the way that they perform the play, or they're planning on performing the play, is within their own language, but it's like subtitled. One person particularly steals the movie for me was the Korean actress who plays the mute. I don't know anything about this actress. I think it's her first movie, and she's barely in the movie. She only has a couple of scenes, but I think there's one scene where it's the lead actor and the driver, and they're having dinner with, like, her family, and she's kind of just talking, and her husband translates for her. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just something very, like, calming about the performance, you know, just watching someone act. And I'd never seen someone in film do that before, like use sign language. But also, like, she doesn't overly or underly express anything. It's very kind of like normal.
Well, recently, A Quiet Place 2, I think that came out this year. Is it similar to that? Like, kind of understated signing?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Obviously, there's no monsters in this movie. But yeah, you see her in a few scenes, and she does so well. But yeah, just the performances of the lead. It's a very understated movie. You know, there's not a lot of like really obvious acting. There's no drooling.
It's not your typical over-the-top Japanese performance.
It's definitely like the Japanese do this kind of performance really well. This kind of movie to me is very spellbinding. You know, you kind of just watch. I mean, there's no action in this movie, but again, I said like when I was talking about the French Dispatch, you watch something for the choreography of the movement of the film, but for this, you just watch it. You just watch it for the acting, like you kind of like disappear into the movie, and you disappear onto the relationship with the driver and the playwright. You know, it's a really deep movie. It's probably the most Haruki Murakami like adaptation that you could get.
Just melancholic.
Yeah, it's very melancholic, and I can imagine our tester, who's of course would like this movie. But I mean, it's not even that depressing either. It's just a great meditation, and it's like if I wanted to, it's really the kind of movie that I strive to like write in my career if I could do that. But I'm probably still too young to have that much knowledge on that kind of stuff. So yeah, great movie. It's hard because I don't really have a lot of people to talk about movies with like this, because it's not really a talking point, and it's not a movie that a lot of people will see. It's definitely an art house kind of film.
I mean, this is the forum for it. It sounds like in terms of Asian movies especially, it seems like a standout.
I feel like this is real Asian representation. I mean, there's no real such thing. You can get representation from whatever, but like from exploring other countries' films, I feel so much of this film in me, and maybe I relate to it more because we lived in Japan as well. Well, the film takes place in Hiroshima, but you know, there's just the sentiment of it and just the way people interact. I kind of just get it.
Something genuine about it, right? It sounds like Minari as well. You know, the idea behind this kind of representation is it has to be genuine for that kind of authenticity. Yeah, you can tell when a studio is just pumping out representation for the sake of representation, as opposed to a film that has come from a place, a personal place, I guess. Yeah, no, great movie. All right, sounds good.
Before we get on to our number one,
should we do some honourable mentions?
Yeah, let's do some honourable mentions.
Spider-Man, No Way Home.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
So yeah, good film.
Good film.
I do have my issues with it, but as a fan of Spider-Man, somebody that's watched all of the Raimi films and sat through all of the reboot sequel, The Amazing Spider.
Through it?
They're not my favorites, I'm going to be honest. And yeah, has kept up with the MCU's version of Spider-Man. You know, Spider-Man No Way Home is just a really good love letter to all of those films.
Yeah, on a quick note, I think, you know, I'm not the biggest MCU fan, but I did enjoy the Tom Holland movies, and I did enjoy the lead up to this. I really enjoyed the theatre experience with this as well. Watching it with people who are enthusiastic about it, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, I can be critical of MCU films, but it's also like let the people enjoy like these kind of films as well. I'd never take that experience away from anyone.
Yeah.
Cinema is cinema, and film, you know, just to be able to enjoy a film like that, it can be personal to you. It might not be super personal to me, but yeah, it was good to watch. And I think I was kind of reminded of that watching this movie. So, I
mean, like, without getting into spoilers, my main criticism of the film would be that it is more fan service than a film standing on its own.
Yeah, I get what you mean. A lot of its plot is pretty convenient, like, you know.
But I mean, Kevin Feige said something that kind of made me eat my own words, and he said something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing here, just having people watch this kind of film and think back on all the previous films that they've watched and to get that kind of emotional response, even though it is based on nostalgia, it's still a huge feat to get, so many people feeling your film on an emotional level. And hats off to everybody involved in this, because everybody in the cinema that I watched it in reacted on an emotional level.
Yeah, same, for sure.
But I stand by my criticism.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Any other special mentions?
No Time to Die was quite good.
I was going to say that too.
What did you like about No Time to Die?
Just how good this movie looks.
Yeah.
I think we had kind of a fairly expectation of this movie, but when I watched it, wow, this movie looks really good. Just the atmosphere of some of the action sequences, especially the one in the forest as well. Yeah, I think just the look of the movie, its cinematography was this very strong point for me. It was atmospheric.
Yeah. Even Daniel Craig's performance was quite good.
Yeah,
surprisingly
even
good.
Though he's gets me out of the series now. What else you got?
I put A Quiet Place 2 up there, just in terms of strong sequels. It's not a particularly memorable film.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet.
But if you like the first one, you'll probably like the second one. The world building that they do in it is well handled. Yeah, strong sequel. Kind of flew under the radar, I think. But yeah. Have you got anything else?
I actually have quite a few. You already mentioned Spider-Man and No Time to Die and Suicide Squad and Willy's Wonderland. They were special mentions. A couple of other, I guess, I'd call Hollywood or American films. You and I had a different opinion on this one, I think. Don't Look Up, I actually really enjoyed. That movie has been very mixed.
I've actually got it on my honourable mentions as well. Yeah, it's a good film.
It's funny. Probably insulting its audience a bit too much. Not very subtle in its message, but you know what? It's funny. And maybe sometimes things don't need to be subtle all the time.
As Leonardo DiCaprio says, it's not the best Timothée Chalamet movie to come out this year.
Oh, yeah, that's what Timothée Chalamet is in this movie. There you go. Sneak it in.
I feel like if you're not sensitive over the subject matter on any level, you'll enjoy it.
I think it's funny because I like kind of lampooning that side of things. Some other films, The Green Knight, I quite liked.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like an interesting medieval tale told in its kind of especially A24 style of film. I liked Possessor. It has a really interesting premise. I think it was about an assassin that takes over people's minds and then does her work through that. Pig was an interesting movie with Nicolas Cage. I'm surprised how well received this movie is. The way the movie was marketed was John Wick, but with a pig instead of a dog. But It's not really like that at all. But yeah, it's a good movie. I guess because this whole podcast is us promoting Asian cinema, there's quite a few Asian films that I've want to mention. Night in Paradise, which is a Korean gangster thriller on Netflix, is quite good. It's got a really cool climax. This movie that I told you about, that we said our tester said was really bad. I really like this movie. It's called We Couldn't Become Adults.
Yeah.
I felt like this movie hit some spots that were a bit too real. It's about a dude, the film starts with him being a complete failure, and then he remembers all his past flings that just didn't work out. And it's just whoa.
It's about being sad in Japan, right?
Definitely...
We've definitely experienced that.
Yes. I saw two other Taiwanese movies which may have appeared on the list, but I didn't put them on because they were 2019 releases. One is called A Sun. Very interesting drama, and that also kind of has a genre switch as well. I'd recommend that. Really great film. And another movie, actually not Taiwanese, it's a Thai movie. And we don't talk about Thai cinema a lot.
And we never will, Thailand. All you Thai people out there, stop listening to us. We'll never give you the credit that you deserve.
Yeah, no, this movie is one that Risky told me to watch a fair few times, and another mate of mine. And when I finally got around to it, I was pretty blown away. It's called Happy Old Year. It's about a girl who wants to live a minimalist life, I guess, and she wants to get rid of all this old stuff in her house. But a lot of the stuff is attached to certain memories of people. Sounds cheesy, but it's done really, really well. This may have even been my number one if it was released in 2021.
Okay.
Like, this movie was really good. But that's all I'll say about it.
Okay.
Let's get into our number ones.
Okay, number one for me was Words Bubble Up Like Soda. It's an animated film by Kyohei Ishiguro. I haven't seen anything else from him, but he directed one episode of Psycho Pass. But yeah, it's a slice of life romantic comedy about two introverted teens that meet each other and start a relationship while helping an elderly gentleman locate a keepsake from his deceased wife. Nice, simple story, beautifully animated. Yeah, hit me in the feels.
I feel like I'd really like this movie as well.
It's nice. Like, it's just a really pleasant watch. It doesn't get overly deep at any point. Like, it is very slice of life. But because of that, I just found it really charming and really refreshing. Like, all the characters are so, like, such nice people. Yeah, it's about finding someone that you can kind of come out of your shell to, which is, I think, something that everybody can kind of relate to. Something about old people that triggers me every time. Like, this movie made me tear up at one point. And it's just, none of the other films that on my list had really done that. So I had to put this at number one.
You mentioned that it makes you tear up. Like, I feel like anime does that to me. Like, there's just something about anime that hits me in the feels. Like, I'm just looking at the pictures now. Like, I'm like, oh man, I feel like I'm gonna. My tears are gonna bubble up like soda pop. You know? Like, I'll be like, oh man, it's I love these kind of slice of life animes. Like these really vibrantly drawn, charming animes. Like you know, like. Or the Makoto Shinkai movies. Or Hosoda.
Yeah, it's a combination of colors and animation and music that just all of it put together. It just triggers an emotional response that you can't really explain. I don't know. It's just a great film.
It's interesting because we like some pretty dark stuff, but it's like these kind of movies as well. I guess we're just growing up, like, you know.
Yeah,
like,
we're getting sentimental in our old age.
Our number ones share a thing in common, is that they're both anime.
Okay.
My number one is Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 Thrice Upon a Time.
Okay.
When all the rebuild of Evangelion movies were released on Prime, I kind of watched them day by day until this one was released. So I reacquainted myself with the series. And I watched like Death and Rebirth, I think it was. And then I watched End of Evangelion. And I hadn't seen End of Evangelion before. And I watched it like, man, for 97, for that time, this animation is fucking brilliant. But I'm so fucking depressed. Like, the movie. Like,
that's Evangelion's wheelhouse, isn't it? Just beautiful and depressing.
It's like, oh, this movie. And I'm just like, wow. I feel like dog shit. Like, you know, a lot of Evangelion, admittedly, goes over my head because there's so much symbolism and there's so much going on. But with the Rebuild series, they tried to make it a bit more accessible and entirely independent. And in that sense, I think it failed on making it an independent piece, because I feel like its enjoyment is knowing what happened with the first set of films, because the final one, Thrice Upon a Time, when you finish watching the movie, it kind of feels like a breath of fresh air, because you know that Hideaki Anno, he's the director and creator of Evangelion, he's been going through so much shit with this series. Like, you know, with the original ending, was kind of positive, but really super whack. And then the fans were like, we didn't like the ending. Okay, I'll make End of Evangelion for you. And then it's like the most depressing thing that you ever see. But talking about this movie, Thrice Upon a Time, the visuals are just fantastic. And I was watching an Amazon Prime interview with the director Hideaki Anno and I think Japanese comedian called Hitoshi Matsumoto, and he was talking about why I enjoyed the movie, and he says like watching this movie is like walking through an art museum. There is just so much raw emotion with the imagery in this movie. One of the big selling points is the song at the end of the movie that accompanies it. Like when I was talking about with Kenshin, the song was done by Utada Hikaru, and it's called One Last Kiss. And it's like, whoa, like when you watch the end of the movie and I can't really spoil it, but like with just the way that it's kind of shot and then the music kicks in, it's like, whoa. Like even right now, like, I'm choking up, man. Oh, fuck. It's really, it's such a beautiful movie.
Yeah,
it
looks good. Like, it looks like the kind of film where you could take a still from any section of the film and it's like a poster that you can put on your wall.
Yeah, it's like, there's so much to unpack. I think my favorite part of this movie is like the first act, which is almost, there's no action. It's like for a while, they're kind of in this village that's surviving post, they call it the third wave or the near third wave. You'd have to watch the other ones to get to it, but Rei kind of has more of an arc, and just kind of like living her life, and like discovering emotions, like human emotion. And it was just a joy to watch. There's some weird, janky CGI at some point. There is definitely a lot of exposition, but I think it's coupled with such great imagery, and the exposition has such weight. Like if we're comparing it to The Matrix, where it's just like basically Charlie Brown's teacher going flop, 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 flop. Like this movie is like, oh man, I can't even fully explain why I like this movie so much, but I guess like in the simple terms, as I was saying, it just like leaves you as like, I just felt like, a cool breeze had passed, and it's like Hideaki Anno is just letting go of his depression. It's like, there you go, be free, man. You don't need to fret anymore. You're done with this series now until Hollywood comes in and digs it from the grave. But you're free for now, And I think that's what I think it's the feeling I got at the end of this movie, that like, it was just great.
So it feels like the end of an era to you.
Yeah. 25 years, man, of making this series that has caused him so much stress, and it's fine. It's done. Because, the Rebuild series, there was like a 12-year gap almost.
Yeah.
The one before the final film was 2012. So 9 years or so. It was like, damn, man. Like, apparently he was going through... his depression had relapsed when he was writing this movie because he just didn't know how to end it. Because the third one in the series wasn't that well received of the Rebuild. But then, he finally got it. Like, the whole cast is back,
Do you think it brought enough new things to the table to...
I won't go into it too much because you should watch them. After the second movie, the plot shifts, like, completely. So it's a new story, but with its like core tenets, but less depressing. So like, it's funny, I've talked with some people and they're like, oh yeah, I like End of Evangelion more. Like, they like to be depressed.
Yeah.
And apparently there's been some like discussion between fans, but I don't even enter that shit. Like, to me, I've got this like kind of personal moment with the movie, and I like would rather not engage with that shit. I'm just like, this is how the movie made me feel, and I just loved it. It's great.
Cool. All right. I think that caps off our top 10 list for 2021. Would you agree with them? Yeah, these are really good films, like, for us, but, like we always say, taste is subjective. So, yeah, let us know down below what films you thought should have been on our list. You can get in touch with us at twoasianblokes@gmail.com, or you can join our Facebook group to be part of the conversation. We're going to be following this up shortly with our worst 10 movies of 2021.
Which should be a shorter episode.
A somewhat different discussion.
I love talking about movies that I love, and I've only just come to realize, oh shit, we've been recording for ages. But I think that's just cinema, man. Like, I enjoy watching things I like more than I enjoy watching things I don't like. And I love talking about them, and was really like interested in listening to Dan's list, because it's pretty different, and we only had one overlap. Right?
That's right, yeah.
With doing, and it's like, no, this has been a fun recording.
For
I'll
us,
probably
anyway.
Get another drink. Dude, I don't know what I give a fuck about. I don't want to care about you feeling good. I just want to hear you talk shit. So the next episode is going to be about Cowboy Bebop, because that's what gets us the most views.
And it's going to be like 10 times the amount of views of this episode.
Yeah. That's okay. We do this because we like talking about shit we like.
They're fun discussions either way.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Peace.
All right. See you later, guys.